This video is the third installation of the Cinnabon series, the series where I revisit an entire franchise for my torture and your enjoyment. £120 can get you a lot of cool things, such as every Skylander, and I mean, well, to be fair, that's actually quite generous, a meal deal from the airport, or 6 to 7 inches of absolute degeneracy. But why bother with any of that when you can buy the entire Worms franchise? Typically when covering a boatload of titles, I like to pick the franchises that I have a ton of nostalgia for, so I couldn't not include Worms. Worms first evolved over 500 million years ago. Wait, no. Worms is an accidental masterpiece created by Andy Davidson, the then unheard of programmer who created an artillery game parody inspired by Lemmings, purely as a joke to amuse himself and school colleagues. However, after a great reception from his peers, he decided to take the idea further. With the idea of publishing this in mind, he realised selling it as a Lemmings clone would probably be a slight copyright infringement, so they were changed to Worms, and the title was then altered to Total Wormage. Davidson took Total Wormage to many publishers, with little to no success. But in 1994 he took his work to the European Computer Trade Show, where Team 17 had a stand, who made an offer on the spot to develop and publish the game. Created from merging British publisher company 17-bit and Swedish development team named Team 7, Team 17 was formed. Team 17 has developed a variety of popular indie games, and like The Escapists, Overcooked, Alien Breed, and Leisure Suit Larry. Regardless, upon Worms' release, it became almost genre-defining for artillery games. So first up is Worms 1995. Right, first of all, for a game that's 28 years old, this runs fantastically. Sure, it's absolutely tiny on my screen, but with the power of editing, I can save you from squinting at your monitor. You're welcome. The subscription button is literally just a click away, so save my eyes and pay for my new set of glasses. From the modern eye, I feel like most people would look at this and see a massive, underwhelming product. And although this is my first time experiencing the earliest iteration of the series, I couldn't deny it has one hell of an addicting charm to it. It may not be the prettiest game, and I may not be the best at it, but sure as hell did my first hour fly by when I was testing the waters. The good bits are great, with really out there dialogue and music. Maps are completely destructible, a staple in the genre and franchise people grew to love. And it's all wrapped up in a 320 by 200 resolution gift box of Ultimate Worm on worm brutality. The bad bits only stem from age, such as the controls, though I am sure there are ways to modify this if it became that much more of an issue. For those interested, the arrow keys are used to move, shift is to jump, and spacebar is to shoot. It's also got such British roots too, which can be heard in the various voice lines thrown back and forth between characters. In between matches, random horrifying cutscenes will play, which include nothing of much meaning, but I'm sure it gave the game time to load. Worms 1995 is the foundation of all of the games to come. Even from early days, I can see so many features that are included that will stay with us throughout the entire franchise. Although the most linear gameplay here is present, so is the core features of what makes the series stand out, such as the wind affecting certain projectiles, along with the sudden death feature, which will play out in every game to release. Worms Pinball, probably the only game here that looks as awful as it plays, which is saying a lot because, well, it didn't work. And yeah, this is the 47 seconds of gameplay I got, so enjoy that. With a full refurbished cartoonist look, Worms Armageddon is fully animated and made me appreciate how much I love not squinting at pixels for entertainment. Armageddon takes a whole new approach to the user interface and art style, the most noticeable feature being the Worms design slowly becoming more defined and will eventually lead to some of the most iconic looks the series has to offer, which in my opinion was a great choice because the realistic take on the character designs in the 1995 cinematics were an absolute eyesore and almost nightmare fuel-esque. Like the title suggests, there's a real emphasis on a militaristic theme. This adds a sense of urgency. If a match is dragging on, you'll be warned about an oncoming nuke, which will soon wipe out the remaining worms. To create more suspense and risk, earthquakes begin as you get close to that nuke strike, causing you to play more tactically to your environment. This version of the sudden death mechanic is a really suspenseful one, as it could easily sway the match's victor either way. Armageddon's selling point was almost identical to its predecessor. The fully destructible maps, except for this time around your arsenal of weapons is greatly expanded. The movement felt much better too. This is probably due to the sleeker look of the art style too, just making it feel better to play and also look at. Worms Blast. Now, with a name like that, you're probably thinking about the crazy explosive possibilities worm-on-worm combat has in store for us, and I can't blame you. Blast is a powerful word to use in your title, so who knows what's going to go down? Oh, it's just Peggle. Worms Blast is a completely separate idea from your traditional Worms game, where you have to hit coloured blocks with coloured projectiles, and if they match the same colour, you can break said blocks. It's basically Candy Crush, it's basically Peggle, it is your mum's favourite game to play on her phone, but regardless, it's here, and it's in Worms form, and it's beautiful. A few weapons and characters make their debut, and inherently this is a major juxtaposition to the type of artillery game I was expecting. You just have a few options to pick from game mode wise. In the puzzle mode, you're given a map of levels to explore with a variety of mini games to interact with, if it doesn't crash. In fact, I see around 20 levels here, but I only got to experience 3. Anything after that and the game would decide to kill itself. This leaves us, however, with 3 other options. Well, 2 if you don't want to turn off your PC. Tournament is a collection of random timed minigames, and they require you to do a mix of things like destroy lines of blocks to get more time, test your skills with various weapons by timing your target practice, which is dumb because, well, you can't use the mouse to play this game and the arrow keys move slower than the targets, but hey, whatever, the developers are learning. Where the real fun begins is in the versus mode, where you get to go up against AI or another player, but probably AI because who the fuck is growing up on Worms Blast nowadays? In this mode, you and your opponent have your own section of the screen, separated by a moving wall. You must break the coloured blocks like in the classic puzzle mode whilst trying to outlive and even attack your opposition. Amongst the blocks are item crates that you can acquire power-ups from to aid yourself by taking out large chunks of blocks, or aggressive items that will hinder the other teams such as spawning a piranha or a C-bomb. This was actually a really enjoyable little arcade game until I faced Calvin. This piece of shit thinks he's king of Peggle. Look at him rubbing it in my face. I simply will not stand for this anymore. So I trained. I checked my basic colours knowledge 10 hours a day. I practiced my aim for days. I was willing to kill a sheep if I had to. This means war. I shot every colour perfectly. Only peak precision and gunsmith expertise on my end. Kelvin was nervous. He tried to attack back out of panic, but I pulled the wool over his eyes. The conflict was brutal, but I had done it. I had won. Except I hadn't, because although all my spare time had been taken by only the most enthralling Worms gameplay, I had an issue. Well, we knew that. Out of the 15 games I have in my arsenal, only 12 of them are on Steam. The other 3 are physical copies ordered from the depths of CEX, and in the delivery process these titles were given to my neighbours, who have decided to take them hostage. So getting these will be a bit of a challenge, which is not only quite annoying, but it breaks up the order in which I'm going to be playing these games. So if the order is not perfect, this is the reason why. Worms Golf. It's exactly what it says on the tin. Golf. Now, you see, I'm not nearly rich enough to enjoy such a sport, but seeing this IP handle a relatively tame sport with some cool arcadey twists was quite alright. I can see how certain people this could be quite relaxing. However, I haven't nearly got enough patience to see this one through. After getting to the 23rd level, I retired. Though I must mention the addition of the Old Woman, Magnets and Wind, which is a staple in every game, here made for some really good obstacles, and it totally wasn't extremely infuriating. Okay, so this is by far one of my favourite video game titles of all time. I've played Ultimate Mayhem for hundreds of hours across many platforms. I'm not sure if I adore it based off the charming old school graphics, the great character designs, customization, or I'm just incredibly biased due to my amount of nostalgia. And a side note, my first ever upload to this channel was a slideshow of Worms Mayhem screenshots 8 years ago. Worms Ultimate Mayhem includes a massive variety of things to do, whilst also perfecting the 3D Worms format. Whereas you may be asking, this is not the first Worms 3D game, and I say to you, yeah, the copy I bought of Worms Forts didn't work, and Worms 3D is basically this game, and this game is the remastered version of that, and if it's not, shut up and let me have my fun. But you can play with up to 4 players, all with a team of 6 different Worms. There's also an option for online matchmaking too. This even features a ranked mode, which is great, but with how underappreciated this game is, 9 out of 10 times you'll be left waiting for a match for hours, but because the lobbies are so barren, I invite my wife on to have some matches, and because we are the only 2 queued up, we get in the same lobby. Unlike most games here, there are 2 campaigns that you can accomplish a variety of tasks, from defending certain worms, blowing up areas of interest, or simply a normal deathmatch with some rules in place. Now, I just want to quickly say, before I get into anything else, the reason I've not talked about any of the weaponry in any of these past games is because they kind of remain the same throughout every single Worms game, and if they do deviate slightly, I will bring that up in the commentary about that game. But because you know they're always kind of the same in every game, I thought the best place to tell you about some of the default weapons that are, famous in this series would be to tell you about them and how they play out in this game, because I'm the most knowledgeable about this title in particular. And also, while I do this, I'm going to make 4 of my subscribers that I've picked out randomly from my comment sections and put them into a game and make them fight each other to the death, so you guys feel included while I spout some nerdy rubbish about weapons in a game where you fight slugs. Sound good? Okay. The bazooka is probably the most iconic weapon with a standard charge-up projectile, and it's a pretty good all-around weapon. Typically this will always cause 50 damage if a direct hit on any singular worm. A shotgun is a more tactical piece of kit. Its damage is quite underwhelming with a measly 25 points per shot, but it also is one of the very few weapons that allows you to fire it twice per turn. This is especially good for lining up big damage. For example, if an enemy is poisoned near an explosive barrel, instead of instantly shooting the barrel for a damage multiplier, maybe it would be in your interest to shoot said worm closer to the barrel, and then with your second shot, hit the barrel for even more immediate damage. A shotgun is also particularly useful in Ultimate Mayhem specifically, because in this game the way it handles sudden death is to make every worm in the match, friendly or otherwise, have 1 HP. So you can basically kill 2 worms in one turn if you have the positioning right and you can't miss your shots. So it's pretty OP if you ask me. Grenades in general all have different functions, but fundamentally are the same. You can throw them with a charged throw similar to the bazooka, but unlike the bazooka, grenades do not explode on impact. Instead, you can determine the seconds the fuse is lit before detonation by selecting the number on your keyboard accordingly. Your standard grenade will explode as usual, whereas a cluster bomb will explode and spawn 3 to 4 smaller bombs, which will then detonate on impact. The Holy Hand Grenade is something these games are almost iconic for, and simply put, it is a grenade blessed by Pope Francis himself, and it deals a disgusting amount of worm damage and environmental damage. The bow and arrow acts like a normal projectile, but also like the gas canister, it doesn't do any impact damage. It will shortly after being stuck into a surface emit a cloud of toxins. One of the more unique equips is the homing launcher, which allows you to send a projectile into whatever direction you see fit, and after a certain distance direct it to a new spot by giving it the coordinates you want it to reposition to. This is especially handy when, worms are hidden behind obstacles or walls that you can't tackle straight on. Placeable items such as dynamite and mines can be used too. Dynamite will detonate 5 seconds after being placed, granting generous damage, whereas you can leave a mine anywhere whilst leaving it inactive. This is handy for setting up defences or denying easy access to areas if you want to play your position. Mines will start a timer and explode when any worm is close enough to it. These can also spawn before the match begins too, sometimes exploding into gas or even failing to explode, so it's risky to move near them. Unless they're player placed, which in case they will always explode. And also in some matches, if you enable this option, you can play a match with a mine spawner, and every few turns it will blast a few mines onto the battlefield, constantly changing the terrain. Lastly, I will cover the traversal equipment. You're given a few options when it comes to moving around the map. The jetpack does what a jetpack does, and so does the parachute, but you also have more tedious, unconventional ways to fly, such as the ninja rope and Icarus potion. These two are probably the most frustrating things to work with, and here's why. Using a ninja rope will allow you to essentially grapple to any surface within a certain range, and you can extremely awkwardly pull yourself up. If you get caught on terrain, objects or architecture, unfortunately you're most likely screwed if you position this in a stupid way. The Icarus potion grants you wings, which sounds great on paper. Well, to actually use this effectively, you must use the jump key repeatedly to flap your wings. However, you must do it in rhythm with each press. Doing this too much will simply make you fall to your death. I'm also going to say that there is a vast variety of different kit that I'm not going to be able to cover here, so if you see anything bizarre happen in this footage, my only explanation for you is, yep, that's a Worms game. And plus, if I covered it all in one video, this would be hours long. I'm not really sure if anyone really wants to watch an analysis that deep on a game that came out in 2011. One of the main things you'll be doing outside of the story and deathmatch modes is the challenge missions, which will help you master your arsenal of equipment. These range from aiming your bazooka to pressing the spacebar every 2 seconds until you want to destroy your PC. Like I mentioned in the intro of the mayhem section, the customizable features are fantastic. Not only can you completely design your own teams and even teams played by the CPU, but also your own weapons to use in game. This can be a custom gun type, grenade, or even an airstrike. So if customizable mechanics are your thing, I really recommend picking this up. Post-editor Cynic here, with a quick note about the rest of the video. Some games I cover may be much shorter than others, as the overall concept of worms pretty much stays the same in most games coming up, so I'll only get into those small details that are unique to the individual games. Also, shout out to anyone who counts how many times the word worm is said in this video. Anyway, back to the Worms Overdose. Revolution was revolutionary. In terms of character diversity, the franchise has been dead set on the same look since its early days, but with Revolution, Team 17 implemented a class system, so now you can use character classes to your advantage. The Heavy is a brute who can tank more hits for the trade-off of being really slow. The Scout is extremely agile, with reduced body mass allowing him to sneak past mines, squeeze through smaller holes, and traverse the terrain more efficiently. The Scientist takes much more damage than your average Joe, but with one on your team, each round your entire team will add 5 health to their health bar. Of course your typical Soldier Worm is here too, but we have watched him play for the majority of this video, so we all get that he's pretty well rounded. This is by far my favourite version of 2.5D Worms visually. With an amazing art upgrade, the addition of tons of new weapons and environmental hazards, such as movable objects, switches, teleporter guns, and even non-lethal water that can be drained and shot at enemy worms to be used in combat. These were present in Revolution, and stuff like magnets was actually introduced in Open Warfare, the second installation on the DS. The voice actor Catherine Parkinson performs such a perfect personification of the Worms IP. With Clam Wars introducing such a diverse array of equipment, it made for some great strategies, especially with an emphasis on the use of items like magnets and plug holes, which made for not only good battle tactics, but also included some puzzle aspects too, which has a bit of like a British spy movie sort of theme to it, which is unique in itself. Very random, but I argue it plays in favour of the bizarre concept of worm terrorism. After finally paying the ransom my neighbours had put on my parcel, it was finally time to continue on. However, Thoughts for the original Xbox is one of the few titles that is not backwards compatible with the Xbox 360, and also my Xbox 360 account seems to now be corrupted. But this really did throttle the franchise flow I had going on, so really the best I can do is move on. Worms Open Warfare 1 and 2 are handheld console exclusive Worms games, only available on the DS and the PlayStation Portable. So like a real man, I charged up my DS. Open Warfare is quite bare, which is not a bad thing. It was released in 2006, which not only broke portable console hardware restrictions, but also an unknowing attempt on how to build off previous titles. Worms Open Warfare is nothing special, however. It plays some of the most basic gameplay you get in the franchise, and it's just standard PvE stuff. The controls, however, do feel better than the early PC ports, however, and the dual screen layout works nicely with the Worms view and the weaponry selection screen. There was even a sequel to Open Warfare, which plays out the same way, with a little more polish and some extra weapons, and for the consoles they're on, they're just really decent depictions of Worms. Worms WMD is a weaponry overhaul. Each weapon has variants that change the specs of the baseline mode, with an arcade-like campaign where you're typically thrown into a generic deathmatch. But because of all the new content it brings, it's never felt so fresh. Crafting is also present, allowing you to build the weapons you don't have, so they are ready for you the next round. Mounted gun and sniper turrets have the potential to really sway matches in one team's favour. Minigun turrets will shower the enemy with lots of steel bullets, whereas the flamethrower will scorch them, and a sniper covers huge ranges to deal some sharp damage. WMD is also the first game to introduce buildings with an interior to take shelter within. In doing so, you can take cover from loads of incoming projectiles. Along with this, vehicles have a great amount of destructive potential too, because you can level areas out and obliterate worms with helicopters, mechs, and literally just a damn tank. But more importantly, this game finally accepts WSD as a movement control, so that's easily a massive quality of life change on my end. Okay, so we are on the final game. In 2020, Worms Rumble was released, and I thought it was another classic style Worms with, modern graphics and polish, but oh boy, was I wrong? Rumble is a major juxtaposition to anything we've seen so far. Sure, we've seen Golf, Pinball and Peggle in this mess, but Worms Rumble is a real-time 2D platform shooter. I was actually quite optimistic for once, because I was thinking about how well a non-turn-based style would play out for the franchise. But oh boy, I did not enjoy this one bit. The movement is okay and feels good enough to be passable, but the gunplay is the most boring eyesore I think I've seen in a while. Jumping around randomly spamming bullets till someone dies is just not a fun mechanic. Not to mention the entire Worms class system is completely removed. Why? Because fuck you, I guess. They even reduced the massive amount of unique weaponry these games have to offer. Like, there's literally 7 guns that look like plastic, and they're really weirdly designed. I'm no game designer, but why did they have to change this? I can understand the rest of the game runs nice and it's smooth, but come on. Gunplay is so janky, which also doesn't help because guns are either ridiculously bad or ridiculously good. I usually find myself getting steamrolled by someone with 100,000 plus hours. Sure, I can pick up weapons, which is an okay idea, but I can't help but think Team 17 didn't know what they wanted this to be. It feels like it wants to be Fall Guys and some sort of hyper ADHD kiddie shooter, and it's disappointing because, well, it achieved that. It kinda sucks though, because it does just sound like I'm saying new thing equals bad, but I just wanted to enjoy a new format of a Worms game, but this just wasn't it. It's totally okay if you enjoy this game, but respectfully, if that's the case, you probably also thought Trap Team was a good game and spit on homeless people. I even left my first negative review, which is really saying something. I'm not even afraid of upsetting anyone, because more sources talking about Rumble claim it to be abandoned, and for once I don't even blame them. It does suck that by the end of a Cinephon, it ended up with disappointment, but hey, that's a more cynic video I guess. Overall, I have to say the Worms franchise has a great amount of chaos to offer, whether that be the great adaptations of 2.5 deathmatches, 3D masterpieces that give worm whacking a great arcadey style, look and feel, or even just revisit the classics, or if you just feel like wasting £11, feel free to play this crap. Also, if you haven't noticed, I've taken the names of random subscribers and commenters on the channel and named all the different worms in this video after you, so if you see your name, make sure to use a timestamp and tell me where you are in this video if you are indeed in it. So, there's that. Hopefully you find yourself, if not, sorry.